All right, welcome to Climates of the World. Here's where we're going to start looking at this title page. You can see that the months are changing here, as is the weather. And here, really, we're looking at temperature. So we want to get into climate being temperature and the weather over a long period of time. So let's look at climates of the world. Here we first begin with our three climate zones. We have a tropical climate zone, right here in the reddish pinkish. You can notice that this is near the equator. Right? We also have this greenish, which is temperate. That's where we live, right? Further from the equator, both north and south. And we have the polar regions, right? Our polar climate zone down here at the bottom, up here at the top. Now, if we look at these climate zones, there are some important lines of latitude that help us realize where one begins and where one ends. Up at the top, we have the Arctic Circle, right? That's at 66 degrees north. Again, that is latitude because it's going across. The Tropic of Cancer here at 23.5 degrees north. Again, line of latitude. Down here, we have the Tropic of Capricorn, right, which separates this tropical area in the orange from the temperate of the green. And then finally, the Antarctic Circle at the very bottom. So, if we look at this, right, we will notice right away that in the middle, right, based on our key, it seems to be really, really hot in this area. So, let's put this together. Close to the equator, which is right about here, it's hot. Right, this is our tropical zone. It is hot, it is wet, and let's point this out now. This is near 0 degrees latitude. So when we're talking about the latitude in the tropical zone, these are low latitudes. Low meaning close to 0. So anything that's low latitude, we're talking tropical climate. If we come out to the ends, right, here is our North Pole. Here is our South Pole. This is where polar bears are doing their best to live. Up at the poles, it is very, very cold. You can see we have blue up here. We have whitish with purple. And based on this, it is very, very cold. So, let's go back. In the polar areas, it is cold. And these are high latitudes. Notice we're at 60 degrees here. 60 is far away from 0. So these are high latitudes. Polar is high latitude. Then we get to our middle latitudes, right? Again, we are right about here in Rhode Island. We kind of have a mix here, and as you're aware, it's seasonal, so it changes for us. But in around this area, these middle latitudes, again, let's go back, the middle latitudes between 66 and 23. They're not super low, they're not super high, but they're the middle ones, and that is our temperate climate zone. So that's important to know. Let's really move forward this time, right? And here you can see the two together, right? Cold up top, cold on the bottom. There's your polar at the high latitudes. Then we have the temperate coming in a little bit, right, in our middle latitudes. And finally, the low latitudes in the middle is where it is hot. It is tropical. It's usually pretty wet or pretty dry. It's extreme in one way or the other. So, latitude is something that can determine what the climate is going to be. Another thing is altitude. Altitude means how high up you are from sea level. So, let's look at this map. Dark blue means you're at sea level, right? So most of the world is pretty close to that. However, if we go up to the red, right, we're talking at 5,000 meters. That's super, super high. These are tall, tall mountains. If you're familiar with Mount Everest, it's right about here. If you've ever been up on a mountain, you probably know that the higher up you go, the colder it gets. Right? So that's the idea here. As you go up into these mountains, the Himalayas where Mount Everest is, you're going high up in the sky, it's going to get cold. Here in the Andes Mountains in South America, again, these are very, very high areas. The higher up you go, the colder it's going to be. So we have two things that are going to affect the climate. So far we have latitude, right? Are you near the equator? Are you far from the equator? And now a second one is altitude. Are you high up in the air or are you down at sea level? The higher up we are, the colder it's going to be. Right. Let's look at this. Right. Here's a map of the world. We've got a couple major cities, major areas that are listed. Right. Let's put in some important lines. Right. Polar up here. Now we've got our temperate in this area, and right down the middle is the tropical. Right. Notice this. Right. It's white in this area. Right. It's white right here. The phone's ringing. We'll pretend it's not. Right. But white is polar. So how is there polar in this area where it's supposed to be temperate? Temperate is supposed to be kind of in the middle. Well, if you know your geography, you'll know that here we have the Rocky Mountains. The mountains are high, which means you're higher up from the ground, so it's going to be colder, and that's why it looks like it's polar here in America. Let's look at a couple other places. Right. Here we are near Mount Everest again. It's white because it's high up. It's going to be like it's polar. Andes Mountains again. Here in Ethiopia, there are some high mountains. Right. And let's move on to our third piece. So we've got latitude, right, where you are coming across the world. You've got altitude, how high you are up from the ocean. And finally, the ocean's currents. Right. The ocean is huge, huge amount of water. It's not just a big puddle that's sitting there. It is moving all the time. These currents are like rivers, right, underneath the ocean. And these have either hot or warm water based on the red, or they could be cold based on the blue. The important thing for us to realize is that rain, precipitation, or snow could be precipitation, is driven by the way that these underwater streams go. Anywhere that you see red, where it's warm water, you can expect there to be a lot of rain. Right? If you look at this south equatorial current, it's going to come this way, it's going to come this way, right? And it's going to come right up this area. If you're familiar with your geography, this is the Amazon River. It's wet, wet, wet. It's a tropical rainforest, and it's a tropical rainforest with a lot of rain because of the ocean's currents. So we have three main things that are going to lead to our effects on climate. Latitude, where we are in the world based on how far from the equator. Altitude, how high up you are. Here we are again with those snow-capped and glacier-capped Himalaya mountains and Mount Everest, and it depends on the currents of the ocean. Okay. Just to finally make that point about the precipitation, right, the rain, these dark areas are where you get the most rain, right, and if you were to go back, right, if we go back and forth here, we can see the darker areas. Here we are in the Amazon. Let's look at this one. Right, Indonesia also has a lot of red around it, so it all works out. I hope this has been helpful. Good luck on your quiz.